Yeah, yeah. Hello and Assalamu alaikum for the Muslim viewers out there. All right. My name is Adil Safir, and I'll be the presenter for today. Today we have on our panel we have Peter Reynolds, who's a politician from right to left. Peter Reynolds, and he's a
Good evening.
politician. Ahmed Salam, who is a banker,
Good
uh,
evening.
who is in the middle, and Rehan Shaheen, who is a businessman in the white shirt, and Mansoor Manan in the blue shirt, who is a banker.
Hello.
Yeah. And I want to start off this discussion. This discussion is who was responsible for the world financial crisis. And I'd like to start with Rehan Shaheen, who is a businessman. Who do you think is responsible for the financial crisis?
I think what I would say is that certainly my background is that I used to be a banker. I'm now no longer in banking, which allows me to look at everything probably a little bit more dispassionately.
Okay.
I think he's a frozen banker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a pity.
All right. So sorry. Okay. Sorry about that, viewers. What about Peter Reynolds? What do you think? Who is responsible for the financial crisis?
Okay, well, I would say that the people who you can really lay the blame with are the regulators.
Okay.
And I suppose in turn, really the people who set up the regulators are governments.
Okay.
And I think probably the truth of the matter is that governments don't understand the sophisticated financial markets we have nowadays. So they appoint people to regulate them. The people who regulate them are hand in glove with the bankers themselves. It's like you know, the poacher looking after the pheasants, if you like.
So how exactly are the politicians helping the bankers into the situation that we have now? What is the main problem? Is it just not regulated properly? Is it just too lax?
I think it's not regulated properly, yes, because as I say, I don't think the politicians understand the sophisticated financial markets. So they appoint regulators to regulate them.
Okay.
But the regulators are in league, if you like, with the bankers.
Okay. So you're a politician.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend?
Well, I think politicians are probably responsible for most of the ills in the world.
Okay.
I really do. I think politics is a completely corrupt business. I think but bringing it back to the financial markets,
Yeah.
if you look at what's happened in this country, particularly, if you look at what's happened in this country, you know, the chap who's the head of the FSA, the Financial Services Authority, is quite clearly complicit in the crash of the major British banks, and yet he's gone on and been promoted, and now has another Lord Adair, I think his name is, now has another position, and the whole thing is corrupt. When I say corrupt,
Okay.
I don't necessarily mean that people are taking bribes, but what I mean by corrupt is that people are not, that these organisations and regulators are not doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay, so it's corrupt. So what do you think, Ahmed Salam? Do you think the system's corrupt?
I'm delighted that Peter's made that point, because I think it actually makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
despite the politicians trying to throw the brickbats at the bankers, the reality is that the politicians were always trying to drive a system whereby they kept all the bubbles in the world going. So whether it's a housing bubble or the standard of living bubble that people had got used to, by filling them up with debt when they could not afford the debt, they encouraged via the regulators
Okay, but you say that
find ways to basically pump debt into the system that allowed everybody to live way beyond their means. And so then the politicians decided, look, if people wake up to this, they're going to start blaming us. So we better start pointing the finger at the bankers.
Absolutely, yes.
But I'd like to just stop you. I'd like to just stop you right there and ask the question: politicians, aren't they supposed to serve the people? And if the people want to get themselves into such a predicament, then isn't it their fault themselves? So I'd like to pose that question to Rahan Shaheen. Isn't it the people's fault themselves that they got themselves into this mess?
Okay.
Or is it the politicians' fault?
It's going to take an incredibly brave politician to tell people that they've been living beyond their means and actually they're at fault. That's a surefire way not to get elected. So, much as I'd like to believe that politicians...
Well, I'm not a politician, so...
You know, I mean, frankly, that's never going to happen. You're never going to have a politician the finger at the electorate. What's going to happen is that, as Ahmed says, you know, it's very convenient to find a scapegoat, put it all on them and say, look, this is why we're in the mess we're in. The truth is that I'm not here to defend every practice that happens within banking, because there are a lot of problems and a lot of issues in the industry. But what I'm saying is that the bankers were serving a consumer need. They were probably doing it in a very self-interested way. But the truth is that we were all living beyond our means, and that has contributed over the last 25 years, causing the problems that we have today. And it will take another 25 years to sort out the problems that we're in because of that.
Okay, but I want to talk to was it Mansour Manan, who's just come back to us, right? You say Rehan Shaheen has just said that we've had this problem for a long time with the system that we have now, and Mansour Manan, you say that you work for a Islamic banking company, right? So what is so different about Islamic banking? Do you think Islamic banking could be the solution? You have to speak up. We can't hear you at the moment. Okay, so I'm gonna move back to Peter Reynolds, because you know about Islamic banking, right? You say you've done some work for Islamic banking before, and you understand the system.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, sorry. We can hear
Okay.
Right. Now.
Okay. I was just going to say that the basic premise for the Islamic banking is that it is based on real economy.
Okay.
What has happened and why we have issues in the financial system, right? And we probably will.
Sorry, can I just stop you, just because for the viewers that don't know what Islamic banking is, I'm not very educated in the field of Islamic banking. Can you please explain the difference between Islamic banking and conventional banking, and then maybe go on to describe what the benefits are and how we can get out of this financial problem, you know, using Islamic banking. Are you there?
You seem to have lost it.
Oh, no, I can hear you. I can hear you. Okay, we seem to be having problems with Mansad. But okay.
Let me just jump in there.
Yes, please.
I think the Islamic system, in its pure essence, as was just saying, is a system based on the real economy. So it forbids the paying and receiving of interest, and it encourages people to effectively put capital at risk by taking equity positions. So if they're going to buy or sell something which creates a profit, that's essentially the essence behind Islamic finance. So it forbids the paying and receiving of interest. So money is not a means of making more money. It's purely a means of exchange.
I think that's correct. But I mean, I think that's an admirable ambition. But I think, unfortunately, it's completely unrealistic. Because the whole nature of banking is that it uses money to make money, and money does become an end in itself. I think that the aim of Sharia banking is something that anyone from any culture would see as being moral. But I think it's almost, banking is an immoral activity.
By definition. But I think, Peter, I absolutely agree with you, but I think the issue is that what they should be trying to do in Islamic finance, and I think they're failing woefully, is actually adhering not only to the letter of Islamic law, but also the spirit of Islamic law.
Yes, of course.
And all they're doing now, as you and I spoke a little bit earlier, is basically smoke and mirrors around conventional banking and trying to call it Islamic banking.
Exactly.
It's not the case at all. And if Mansour Saab was online now, I'm sure he'd be defending Islamic finance. But I think a lot of people are now becoming more and more...
I'm pretty sure he would. But so what you're saying is now that the current system of Islamic banking is not actually producing the results that would actually get us out of this financial crisis.
Well, the simplest way of getting out of the financial crisis is for everybody to accept a drop in their standard of living of whatever it is, 25, 30, 40%. But that's never going to happen. But that is actually the reality that we need to do, because we're piling up so much debt now. And all the governments are doing, politicians, again, are pumping more debt and pushing it into the system just to try and avoid giving that very unpalatable message that you're going to have to cut your standard of living, Mr. Population, around the Western world because you're living way beyond your means.
Okay, I'd like to just cut back to Mansour Manan, because he was cut off before, and he wanted to explain to us how Islamic banking, in its current form, could actually help us out of this financial crisis. Manan, please.
Okay, basically Islamic banking, there are certain prohibitions in Islamic banking, and that is you can't charge or receive interest. That's number one. Number two is that you got to have real assets on which you can trade. You can't just do any kind of, you can't buy and sell anything that you do not own, or there is no underlying asset. So it is actually related to real economy. You've got to have real assets on which you can...
so could you please explain what you mean by real economy?
Real economy means that it is actually based on underlying transactions which are being done in the economy. It is based on people actually producing income, right, generating assets.
So money that people actually have.
Sorry?
So money that people actually have, rather than in the banks people use quantitative easing and all these sorts of methods.
Is actually is money related to the value of the underlying goods. Okay, so Islamic banking is more to do with trading assets, okay, rather than trading in money. That's a big distinction. But you can't just use money for money purposes. You can't lend money and charge interest on that and create further money. That is a big difference between Islamic banking and the normal banking that we have. You got to have an underlying asset on which you can trade. If those kind of transactions had been followed, we would have never gone into situations where you can create paper money. And it is, if you look at what happened, right, it was a creation of paper money and paper profits without the underlying assets or real assets, but that caused a financial crisis. And now we're going back into, as Ahmad Salam was pointing out, we're going back into the same issues where we're just printing money for the sake of printing money without relating that money to what actually assets we have. And
okay, so some people are saying that the solution is to just lower our standard of living, as you're saying, Ahmad Salam was saying, and Peter Reynolds, you were saying. What was your main point? What do you think is the solution?
Well, what is the solution? I don't know.
What is the solution?
I think as what Mansour was saying, I understand absolutely, but I mean, I think let's be honest about it. I mean, because you're not allowed to charge interest in Sharia banking, what you do is you call it something else. And I mean, being practical about it, I mean, if Islamic banking stuck strictly to its rules, then it wouldn't be able to operate in the modern world. I mean, I think the real problem is that the whole financial system has become so over sophisticated. You know, with the things like the derivatives are the most famous example of that, of these incredibly complex financial instruments and tactics that I mean, it's beyond the wit or the ability of anybody except those people who are involved in it to understand it or to regulate it in any way at all. But unfortunately, I think it's unrealistic to say that we can go back to a system where transactions and money is based on real assets. I mean, you know, that's what we had when we had the gold standard. You know, because if effectively, if you had a £1 note or a £5 note, that directly correlated with £5 worth of gold held in the Bank of England, and
so
I can't see us going back to that. It seems an impossibility.
Okay, but I know I'm slightly out of my depth in this sort of in this sort of discussion, right, with knowledge. But why can't we just? I mean, banks, don't they have a gold reserve? Do they not have a gold reserve anymore? And why can't we just go back to that system? Is it not possible?
I would actually disagree with Peter slightly, because you'll remember that at the height of the financial stresses that we were experiencing, France banned all derivative transactions. I think Italy did the same. I think they had it in the UK. So given that all derivative transactions are actually regulated by somebody in some shape or form, technically to actually ban them, I'm not saying whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing. It could be done. Where there's a way, there's a will. I'd actually like to take a step back, because we're getting into this whole thing about Islamic finance and whether that's the solution. I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
In my view, without trying to defend banking overly, I think they have been made a scapegoat. And I think the thing that people need to appreciate is that when I say that the biggest religion in the world today is materialism, I'm not joking. It's not or Islam. It's materialism, and it consumes everybody in terms of their daily activities, what they do, their aspirations, how they want to live. Materialism governs all of that. And because of materialism, we have this absolutely crazy pursuit of growth in the economy. You know, if the economy isn't growing by 3, 4, 5% a year, we cannot sustain or fuel all these demands.
So, so are you saying that it's less about what the bankers are doing or what the politicians are saying, but more about a culture of spending beyond our means?
It's a culture of spending beyond our means. And, you know, if you ask me, well, look, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
I think there's two things. The first thing is, as I'm
Let me pick. Oh, he's back. He's back.
Oh, he's back. He's back. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, when Emma says 25% standard of living cut, think about it. Think about your own life and how you live. People today eat meat, as an example, maybe 2 or 3 times a day.
I think we're having a problem on the.
We're having some connection problems.
But you will be eating out in restaurants 2 or 3 times or 4 times a week. They will holiday abroad 2 or maybe 3 times a year. They will spend 6 to 10 hours a day on coffee. This is.
But it's the fact that they do it using debt. That's the problem. If they have an income to do it, that's fine. But it's the fact that they're paying for all this with their credit cards.
So,
and then
Ahmed, why are we just fueling all of our lives with debt? Why can't we just earn money and spend out of what we have?
Well, this is the interesting thing, of course, the fact that this change has really only happened in the last generation. If you think back 30 or 40 years ago, and certainly the generation I was brought up with, debt was virtually unheard of. The only debt you ever had was your mortgage. You didn't have a credit card.
People were ashamed of being in debt.
Exactly. And it was only extreme situations that put them into the debt situation. And so within a generation, we've lost that moral repugnance of debt, and we've regarded it to just load up debt as much as possible.
But I'd like to cut you off there just for a second, because there are first-time home buyers nowadays, and they're struggling just to buy a home without a mortgage. But I mean, even getting money for a mortgage.
So why should they buy a home? Until they have enough income, why should they buy a home?
And the reason they're struggling to buy a home is because the price of houses has been escalated to such an absurd level entirely by the financial markets and by this immoral pursuit of immoral greed, if you like. That's the reason they can't buy a house anyway.
So the price have been. So you're saying the price have been inflated because of these. I blame the previous generation then, but the previous generation has been buying houses all the time.
We've all done it. We've all done it. I mean, back in the 1980s, when I was working in London advertising agencies, I would spend as much on going out for lunch as I spend on food for the whole week now. And I wouldn't think about it. And I'm talking about 1980s money as well, you know?
So basically the culture has fueled this, and so what do we do now then? What do we do now, really? I mean, if we've been given this, if we started off with this culture that's inflated the prices of from everything from houses to food, then how are we going to go back to a normal standard of living where you just spend within your means? Or would you have to get a mortgage just to and get loans just to live life as you are normally? Just to live.
Well, sorry, carry on.
No. Let me just give it to Mansour Manan. Please speak. What is your opinion on this?
Yeah, sorry, I just want to clarify one point that was raised earlier, that we can't apply Islamic banking today because it doesn't seem to be realistic, because we're not going back to the gold standards, because we're not going to be trading in the real assets. That is not the. I just want to counteract that. Not counteract. I mean, I just want to give a clarification on that. When we talk about real assets, right, you can trade in assets. Right. What it means is that you're not just creating money out of money. As long as you don't create money out of money, you're not going to be creating that false sense. And as you're talking about, as you quite rightly pointed out, the financial market created all these paper profits, and those paper profits have been translated into increasing your house prices, increasing inflation, and all these things over the period of time. If you just go back, a little while into the 1970s, or right, you'll find the house prices were very cheap, and at that time you had mortgage companies who were not prepared to give out mortgages unless you had sufficient income and you were actually earning proper income to be able to afford that house over time. And I think the criteria they used at that time was that they will not give you loan for more than 4 times your salary. Nowadays, the banks started just once we had this big bang in the financial system through the early days of Margaret Thatcher, but you suddenly had banks flooded with money, and they started to push, right, for people to take loans. And I remember even myself, right, getting letters from the banks saying, you could have loans up to so amount. I wouldn't even think about taking loans up to a certain amount when I knew I couldn't afford it. But the fact is that a lot of people did that. And when
so a lot of people being tempted into this sort of culture, and they've spent more than they have.
Yeah, because the banks wanted to create that paper profit. Unless they created paper profit, people were not going to get bonuses, etc. And you had this whole system where it was just accumulating. I mean, it was like a geometric progression, right? Okay. Where people were just borrowing and then borrowing on top of that, etc. and went on. And this is and suddenly you found that your asset values really didn't support.
Okay.
Your asset values did not really support. Right. Really didn't support the income. Right. Support the income levels that you had to pay back. And even last week, there's a whole crisis which has arisen where people have been just paying interest, right? And they now can't afford to pay back the principal amounts. That is because banks push everybody into this kind of into thinking this way that keep paying just interest. One day your house price will be so high that you'll be able to sell it, get a huge profit, and be able to
Yeah, sorry. And I wanted to ask, the years leading up to 2008, I heard that the policy towards lending has changed quite dramatically. The years leading towards 2008, and what kind of what is the situation now? Because if people can't get loans for their, as I said before, first-time home buyers, they can't get loans, and money's completely almost dried up, from the banks. They seem to be storing all this wealth. What can we do now to solve this problem?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the government and politicians today will be absolutely paranoid about house prices not going up. So the reason first-time buyers are so important is because you need to keep fueling the newcomers into the market in order for the property ladder to keep revolving and revolving. So if you don't want to crash in house prices, there's two things you absolutely need. You need low interest rates, because if you don't have low interest rates, you're going to have massive defaults.
And nobody's going to borrow.
Yeah, and if the second thing you need is new buyers coming into the property market. Without both of those two things, the property market collapses. And some would say actually a collapse in the property market is what is warranted, because you need to have a moment of realism where you realize that the bubbles you've created over a period of time are not sustainable, and somebody's got to take the pain.
Absolutely. And this idiotic idea they came up with in the budget, this idiotic idea for subsidizing house prices, it's like so much, not just the Conservative Party, but all modern politicians. They seem to come up with these crazy ideas which aren't properly thought through. This new policy is quite clearly going to result in wealthy people buying second homes and getting government funding for it. And it's not going to do anything to solve the problem at all.
If you subsidise I just want to ask Peter, if you subsidise the price of houses, and the government is paying a portion of, government would pay a portion of the price of the house, right? Is that what's being recommended by the government at the moment?
Yes, in a way. Yes.
So if you subsidise it, then people would just they would buy even more expensive houses, wouldn't they? And that would just become even more expensive.
What they should be doing is, if they're coming up with these schemes to provide subsidies, they should be focusing these schemes on the first-time buyers. But I mean, really, the problem is more fundamental than that. And I mean, what we really need is, what we desperately need throughout the world is leadership. And until we can, I mean, Margaret Thatcher was mentioned a short while ago, and I mean, although some people might say that some of her policies were responsible for the situation we're in now, we don't have any leaders anymore. What we need is somebody with the sort of leadership skills that Margaret Thatcher. So
leadership is the solution.
Margaret Thatcher was the last person to demonstrate those sort of skills. That's what we need.
Yeah, that's because we've seen the growth of focus groups, and every politician is only ever driven by a focus group now. And secondly, what's the media going to say?
Yeah.
So everything a politician now thinks about is, how can I get another headline? How can I get another story out there that puts me in a good light? And how can I be re-elected in 5 years' time?
Exactly.
And until we break that cycle of politics and politicians interfering and keep trying to make things better for people, and actually accept that people need to take responsibility for their own actions. Governments cannot keep dealing with things. The point that Peter made about the taxpayers basically subsidising this first-time buyers, who's paying for it? It's the other taxpayers. There's not money coming out of some other bucket. It's simply another allocation of taxpayers' funds.
So, I mean, okay.
Could I just also make a comment on this? The fact is, we've been talking about first-time house buyers, but the fact of the matter is that the economy is struggling right now because they cannot get funds for business. Unless you actually start up business and get the business moving and get the economy out of the kind of deflationary, or until a growth starts in the economy, but you are not going to have enough resources even to pay for these kind of subsidies you're giving to the first-time buyers. Somewhere along the line.
So are you saying that we should support the businesses, or what about the small businesses? Are they as vital as the big businesses that have failed?
UK, actually, if you look at the business in the UK, right, it is supported, especially in the UK, it is supported by small businesses. It's a huge, right, the contribution they can make to the economy. And in fact, in the north, right, where there has been significant factor of this financial crisis, but getting those businesses off the ground, right, and providing them with proper funds to make progress is going to help the economy overall, and will eventually help those people who are trying to struggle to get the houses in for the first time. Because if you increase people's income, right, they should be able to support the purchase of houses. But I mean, the fundamental thing right now is government is pumping a lot of money, right, or trying to export the banks with money to give to the small and medium-sized enterprises, but that
But
money was not
they don't
trickling
seem to be
down.
lending though. What is the? I mean, why aren't the banks lending any money anymore to a small
Because
business? If that's what we need, why aren't the banks lending? I'm just going to ask that question to Rahan Shaheen, please.
Yeah, the
What do you
banks
think?
the banks say they very much are lending, and what I would say is that if you one thing I respect Peter for as a politician is
Yeah.
that by and large we seem to have consensus around the panelists here that actually it's not just bankers who cause this problem. This is a problem which we're all responsible for,
Definitely,
and
definitely.
it's through our joint behaviours that we're actually making that. This. So, practically speaking, we've got to get away from this growth around obsession. This obsession around growth, this obsession around consumerism. We have to live within our means, and you're seeing it already. You see today, because if you look at the high street, people are not spending. There is a lack of confidence. People are not spending on holidays or clothes in the way that they were. Similarly, if you look at the corporate space, companies are not borrowing. So it's not that the banks don't want to lend. Of course, if you're a bad credit risk and you want to borrow money, no bank in the world will lend you money. But if you're a company who actually is reasonably sound financially, the problem is not that the banks won't lend to you, it's that you don't want to borrow.
So there's not enough demand anymore because of this crash. Is that what you're trying to say? Okay. And so what I got from what Rahan Shaheen was saying is that the banks, it's not really a problem of the banks not wanting to lend. It's that a lot of these companies are bad credit risk. Ones that are sorry, yeah, carry on, Rahan.
Yeah,
please.
sorry. And what I was going to suggest was it's.
Oh, he was going to say something, but he didn't say it. But okay, so what I got from Rahan Shaheen was that it's not a problem with the banks wanting to lend. Oh, he's back again.
Yeah, sorry about this, guys. What I was going to say was it's far better if we as a country move towards making these corrections today when it's still within our power to do so, because give it another year, we're going to be in a position that Greece is in, where austerity is being forced down your throats in a very unpleasant way.
Absolutely, and that will lead to social unrest, as it is doing in Greece.
Yeah.
We may only be at the beginning of this crisis. We may only be at the beginning of it.
Absolutely agree.
Okay, so you're saying that because let's just recap. So you're saying these small businesses, because they're not getting enough demand, and the banks have already run out of money from lending out money and not getting it back. So is this a downward spiral then? This is the impression I'm getting, that it's a downward spiral and we're going to go to a level of Greece. What do you think about this, Ahmed Salam?
I think it's a very real danger. I think the politicians are still not accepting the reality of the mess that they have created and the problems that we have. But I think that really is a very serious issue potentially. And the other issue which I think is coming down the track that everybody's nervous of haven't spoken about yet is inflation. And once inflation comes into the system and we see some real tick up in interest rates, which will be forced on the politicians, interest rates will have to go higher, then the problems are just going to get worse and worse because A, the price of the debt that people have taken on is going to go up considerably. And the only thing that's keeping people going at the moment is that their take-home or their repayments on their credit cards and their mortgages as a percentage of their take-home pay is at an all-time low. And that's keeping the bubble that the politicians want, keeping it going for the moment. But that's not sustainable, and that's going to change very soon. And that does lead to significant worries about.
So are you hinting to another dip then? Another dip, and it's going to keep on going down towards Greece. Do you think London will be at the same stage as Greece, or
London is?
Do you think we can stop it?
London is slightly insulated because London is still one of the safe havens of the world because of the historical significance of London, because of the historical significance by having, say, the English language, the ability of foreigners to come in and out of the country very easily. means that London continues to attract an awful lot of capital when there's other problems elsewhere in the world. So whether it's in
So do you think immigration is the solution then? Immigration and foreign workers, maybe cheaper.
No, I don't think that's the issue at all. But what I'm saying is London is insulated, and we have a little sort of microeconomy here.
Okay.
It is completely out of tune with what's happening in the rest of the country.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I think the problem is that we are our own worst enemies. And the reason I say that is that if you accept that actually people are not spending on the high street, that companies are not borrowing, there is zero growth in the economy, then what we're essentially saying is that everybody by default is taking a cut in their standard of living. The problem is that if all politicians said, there's no other way, guys, we all have to take a cut in our standard of living, and that's going to be the case for them. On with that. The problem is, he says, actually, we don't need austerity. There's a magic secret, and that if we hit this button, suddenly we can get back to the way we are. The Conservatives then say, oh, no, blah, blah. What we need is a consensus amongst our politicians, and we need leadership that says that actually there is only one way of getting out of this.
Because some politicians are saying that we should possibly borrow more to get out of this situation. What do you think about that, Peter Reynolds? Do you think we should borrow more to get out of the situation, or do you think...
No, I don't think so. I think we need to do something to increase demand. I wouldn't pretend to be... I mean, I'm not an economist, and I wouldn't pretend to understand in detail how to do this. But I mean, I think there are...
Good, yeah.
I think we have to increase demand, and I think there has to be a... you have to face up to reality, and there has to be some sort of moral restructuring of our society. And
I'm sorry, but as Rahan Shaheen said, if we're all accepting reality and realizing that we're all, or let's say, broke, I mean, how are we going to increase demand?
I wish I knew. I wish I could give you an answer to that.
So I think it's not about increasing demand, it's accepting actually that demand isn't going to increase.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you realise that if you haven't got enough money to spend, how are you going to? I mean,
I think that's a good point that Rahman makes. I mean, you know, we have become addicted to growth, and why should growth always continue? You know, I mean. What's the matter with simply meeting one's needs?
What I'm thinking at the moment is all these problems seem to be down to interest, and people interest rates being low, and people borrowing more than they have because of low interest rates. What happened if there was no such thing as interest? If there was no such thing as interest, and people didn't borrow more than they had, would we be in the same mess as we are now?
You see, interest, why interest was disallowed and frowned upon by by the Muslims, and later on, much more, lot of the jurisprudence, so the legal framework in Islam developed around how you can actually eradicate interest from the transactions that people were undertaking. This is fiqh muamalat. Okay, how you actually, how you can do transactions without having interest, and obviously the solution was that everybody took risk. And in the Holy Quran, it is specifically stated that risk is allowed. Okay, taking profits from the transactions is allowed, but interest is not allowed.
So how do you?
I think the difference, one should need, first of all, I think it's very important to understand what is the difference between an interest-based society and a society in which everybody is taking or participating in the risk and the rewards of transactions. Okay. The difference is that interest gives rise to a fixed amount that has to be paid back by the borrower. Okay, if the borrower is even not earning anything on the money that he has taken, he is obliged to pay back a fixed return. Whereas if you have a system which is based on risk sharing and then therefore taking and participating in the profit,
so more
then obviously those partnership transactions. So that is the basis. Okay, now That actually is probably one of the ways that the governments can increase lending into the businesses rather than trying to force banks to.
So are you saying that you could have a system where, say, I could go to let's say this type of a lender of money, and he could lend me money, but in exchange for, say, a percentage of my business. Would that work? Would that work?
Right now businesses who are facing right now businesses who are coming
Yeah.
up and are facing uncertainty, right, they will prefer to bring in equity partners. Okay, so that those equity partners can come in, both share, hopefully share in the future for the business, future outlook for the business, and can also participate in the profit. What they don't want to do is to be taking on debt, right, which will have to be paid back regardless of whether the business, right, materializes or not. Another thing you must realize is that the difference between equity participation and providing debt is that debt is repayable after a certain time, right? Okay, you may go a debt which is, up to 5 years or 10 years, but eventually you have to pay back the debt. In an equity participation arrangement, right, there is no obligation. There is no, you're not saying that you have to pay back there is no, let's say, fixed time limit where you have to pay back. So the partners can share in both the downside as well as the upside of a business,
So
and in that way
Peter,
you'll be taking a longer term view, right,
yeah.
in business, and that way the economy can benefit much more, because if you take a longer term view, the economy hopefully will come out of this recession and
Okay.
start generating more income.
I think that all sounds like excellent
Solution.
advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And
See,
what is your view on that?
What I would say is that in the world today, if you look at where an Islamic system has been tried to be implemented, there is no good example of where an alternative system is working well and is yielding good results. And I think Peter is right. Is that I think a lot of people's perception of Islamic finance is that it is trying to replicate the conventional system with slightly different language. So if you ask me, what I would do is I would take the existing conventional Western banking system that we have, and I would propose 5 changes to it, which I think would yield significant benefits. The first change is that I would first of all not pay any deposit rates on deposit with banks. So deposits with banks should not be any interest. And the reason for that is that capital should be used in a productive fashion. I do not believe capital should be locked up doing nothing.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that last bit, please?
Ban paying interest on deposit accounts. Yeah, sorry, I would ban paying deposit rates on deposit accounts.
Yeah,
so capital should be used productively in the economy.
Okay.
The second thing I would do.
Sorry, can I
would ban.
Oh, sorry. Can I just hear what Rehan Shaheen is saying, please, first? I'll go on to you later.
The second thing I would do is make sure that there is no easy credit for people who want to live beyond their means. So credit for the sake of going on holiday or for buying a new car that you don't need, I would say, is not credit that should be offered to people. The third thing I would say is ban usury.
Usury? Can you please define that?
Excessive interest rates.
Is that when we have interest rates that are designed to send people under, I would absolutely ban that kind of behavior. The fourth thing I would do is that I would restrict the use of derivatives in the economy, and by that I mean that they should actually be linked to physicals. Yeah, derivatives are basically contracts that are traded on notionals of physical underlying. So, for instance, so you wouldn't actually be buying a gold; it'd be some kind of option contract. What I'm saying is that in some cases derivatives can be good. So if you're trying to hedge the price of corn in the future, that could be a good thing. In some cases derivatives are bad, and I would actually take the speculation out of the system by ban.
So you'd have a solid system of money then.
And the last thing I would do is obviously with bankers and bad behavior. I would actually make sure they're not remunerated on time horizons. Show me true value creation in the economy, and then you deserve to get paid for it.
Well, I'd be very happy to propose Rahman as the new Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, and in fact, what Rihanna just said, that although Rihanna said that no economy, right, he hasn't seen a good example of any economy that has been practiced Islamic banking. But I think examples of Malaysia, they have done very well out of Islamic banking. Their parallel system has been very good. Saudi Arabia is converting mostly to Islamic banking, and their experience has been so very good to date. In fact, they have avoided much. One of the things that one should understand is that where Islamic banking has been predominantly used, and particularly in the Middle East, a lot of those banks avoided the issues that have engulfed the other banks. And banks have faced issues because the asset prices have gone down considerably, and they've had issues there. But they are where Islamic banks have faced problems is nothing to do with the underlying principles of Islamic finance. Is the fact that we are still in the development stage of Islamic finance. We're still training people to understand what it is. We're still training bankers to become Islamic bankers. Right? It's nothing to do with the principles. Right? Is a principle. And in fact, can I just say whatever Rihan just right now, the solutions that Rihan has just stated, right, are all to do with Islamic finance. First of all, the fact that no fixed rate should be paid on deposit is what Islamic banking is all about. In saving accounts, you don't get a fixed rate. You get a rate.
With all due respect, that is absolutely fine.
Sorry, missed out on that.
Islamic banks are actually doing that at the moment.
Could you please repeat that, Ahmed Salam?
I was just saying that whatever Rahan has said is absolutely right, because it is exactly the concept behind true Islamic finance or Islamic
Are they
banking.
practicing it nowadays?
But they're not practicing. There is no institution in the world which is really practicing that form of financial and banking system. So the reality is, if it was actually carried out, we wouldn't have the mess we're in now. But the Islamic banks have been as guilty as their conventional counterparts of following exactly the same push for growth and push for profits by encouraging people to take excessive debt.
What I'd like to know now, actually, what I'd like to actually know is what is the actual system of Islamic banking in comparison to the current banking system that we have right now? Why is it different?
Very simple, very simple. Okay, the basic of Islamic banking is the banks when they take on. Okay, I'm just talking about Ahmad is right. Both Ahmad and Rihan and Peter are right in some respect. Okay, but not entirely. Okay, and they know that I have issues with what they say. One thing is that Islamic bank is only 35 years old. Okay, there is a lot to do on Islamic finance, and they know. And the scholars who are encouraging Islamic finance, they are saying that some of the practices that they've allowed are temporary because we are still developing solutions, right, to people's financial needs, and we need to develop adequate products, which are based on pure Islamic finance and can meet the requirements of today's financial market. So that is a work in progress. And
okay, so Mr. Manan, I'd just like to ask the question.
Yeah, but let me just explain what is the basic difference between Islamic bank and conventional bank. Very simple is that Islamic banks, when they take on deposit accounts, they take on deposits in profit and loss sharing. Okay, they are not with fixed interest, and when they lend money or when they use that money which they have raised from deposits, they use it on the basis of principle of profit and loss sharing rather than on fixed interest. Now,
okay, I'd just like to ask first of all. You say it's not a fixed interest, but is there interest?
No,
there's no interest.
Sorry, there's no interest. I'm talking about profit and loss sharing accounts.
Okay, so there's no interest in Islamic banking.
Although Khalid, rather conveniently, you'll find that the profit rate looks awfully similar to what the interest rate is. How can?
Oh, okay.
Look, I think for that we need to.
I'd like to just ask one more question. I'd just like to ask one more question to Mr. Manan. Is Islamic banking today, as it was supposed to be? Is it actually Islamic banking? Is it by the letter, word for word, as Islam states it should be? Is it being practiced?
Let me just put your question into context. Okay, today Islamic banks represent around $1 trillion, right, of total assets. And
I'm sorry, it's just a direct question. Is it the same? Is it the same?
Let me answer that. Right? As I said earlier, right? Islamic finance. Let me just say, Islamic finance.
Yes or no would be fine.
Islamic finance.
Yes or no?
Today, Islamic finance is working within conventional finance. Conventional finance is very large compared to Islamic finance. Islamic finance is slowly gaining ground in certain economies like Malaysia, like in Saudi Arabia. Once we have large economies totally based on Islamic finance, you'll see a great difference. And you will see that the products being implemented in those countries will be purely Islamic. But today you can't do that because you still have a significant amount of conventional finance in even those economies which are purporting to be Islamic.
Okay, so
what worries me that the two countries you've mentioned have to be two countries with the worst human rights record in the world.
Islamic finance is not to do with human rights. That's political issues. These are political issues. These are political issues.
Political issues. But I'd like to say though, Mr. Manan, I think the answer would be a lot easier if you could say yes or no. Is it exactly the same? Or is it different?
I will say we are 80% there.
80, okay, so I'd say no if it's not 100%.
Well, we cannot be 100%.
Okay, so Mr. Reynolds, I'd like to ask you now, what is the solution? Just what is the solution? I'm looking to you now. I want to know.
Well, as I said earlier, I think the solution is leadership.
Leadership.
And with the present mob, we've got no chance of that whatsoever. I think that probably things have to get worse before they get better.
But I think you mean, Peter, all politicians, not just the current Tories or UKIP or Labour. They've all got exactly the same issues.
So everyone needs to change their attitude, basically, to how they spend. Is that what you're saying, Ahmed Salam?
Well, I think it's going to be forced on people. People are not going to change willingly. They're not going to give up their standard of living and accept the fact that they can't go to Starbucks and have their £3 cup of coffee every morning when they earn £1,000 a month. And it's going to be forced on them very, very shortly.
And what do you think, Rehan Shaheen? What is your final? Just to wrap it up, what do you think the solution is?
Yeah, three things. First of all, in terms of leadership, I think all of us need to push in the same direction. There's no room for party politics anymore. We're in too big a mess for that. Secondly, I think standard of living cut is absolutely essential before it's forced upon us. Third thing is I would change the financial system along the lines that I've pointed out.
Okay, and what were those points again? You could just remind us quickly, the 5 points.
Zero interest rate on deposits, no easy credit for luxuries, ban usury, ban derivatives when it relates to speculation, and align rewards with proper value creation.
Well, that seems like a plan. Thank you. And I want to ask Ahmed. No, we just went to you. Want to ask Mansoor Manan, please. What do you think the solution is, apart from Islamic banking? I'm joking. Well, what do you think the solution is? Ahmed Manan? Oh, Mansoor Manan?
He's gone.
Sorry.
It's to log off.
I think he'll say Islamic finance is the solution, but it's not quite practiced as the way it should be. If it could go back to the true spirit rather than the letter, we would have a solution.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Well, that concludes it for today. So I'd like to just say my final comment is, Rehan, you're back. You're back. Good. Would you like to add anything to that, Rehan?
No. I was just. I would be interested in Mansoor's final comments, but he's.
So carry on. Ahmed, you had something to say?
No.
No, I think you have anything to say? Okay, yeah. What I was about to say is that what I generally got from this is that it's mainly about the attitude of how people spend, and once we start to get real with ourselves, we'll be able to, push forward and hopefully go back to a gold standard, which would be the ideal measure, where people, trade in the money that they actually have rather than the money that they hope to have or what they borrow. So, well, it's been good. So, all right, I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody who's watching, and
Then we got cut off.
oh yeah, Mansoor, you've come back. Sorry.
So I don't know what's happening to my internet connections today.
Just quickly, what would be your final point? What is the solution?
The solution is, as long as we live within our means and we create real assets and growth, I think we can solve our problems.
Okay, there you have it. So, assalamu alaikum and bye bye from me, and from everybody here.
Good talking to you all, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.